Hi, it's Dr. Eaglin here at Daytona State College, and one of the things that allows me to be very productive in my programming and also in my consulting and programming is the ability to not have to worry about things that I'm repeating all the time. And the way that I do that is I've created these base applications that I'm making available on GitHub that do a lot of the common tasks. And what I mean by common tasks, the most common task is taking a complex set of objects and saving them as a file and then retrieving them from a file reliably. And actually what I can do here is not only just retrieve them to and from a file, which is useful if I'm actually making a Windows application, but I can also save that same information into a database, but I only need one field. I only need a large text field to save the entire object into a location. Now this works really well for numeric texts that have very primitives, but that is a lot of the stuff that I actually program, where I am writing engineering applications that do complex calculations, but what's actually getting saved are the input parameters of the different types of calculations. And these make for, so I use the same application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate what this looks like. So this is WindowsAppBase. This is what I use when I'm creating a Windows application. All I do is I just branch off something out of this application out of GitHub, and I can start building right away. What I've done in this program is I've thrown in examples in the program itself of saving the code. So what you actually see here is a form. That's the startup form. I can also, most of the time what I do is I throw up a splash screen first about the application, and then I put in the main screen of the application, because most of the applications are going to require a certain number of calculations or calculational engineering applications. But what actually I show here is this is an XML representation, and I would use JSON today, but when I wrote this, XML was the way to go. Representation of the data that's actually in the application. So if I were to click Edit right here, and I need to pull it over here, this would be, now this is already filled with some default information of an object that I've instantiated inside my project. And I can instantiate a single object, as complex as I want, or multiple objects, or collections of objects, or what I usually use, dictionaries of objects. But the bottom line is, whenever you're creating an application, you're going to have objects that you create that you then instantiate that have inside of them the properties. And here are the three most common properties that I use: strings, doubles, and integers. Actually, I should really probably include the fourth one, which is arrays. So I do, because I do use a lot of arrays. But those are the types of primitive properties of the object that I create. Now, if you don't understand what I'm talking about, that's okay. This is all programming terminology. So, for example, if I take this and I say, you know what, I'm going to make a string example to be a test application modified. So in other words, I modified this, and I'm going to use a different string, 2.17. And I'm going to change the integer to a different number. And now I've done this in two steps. Normally in an application you would probably validate on exit and make sure that all those numbers got updated in the object. But what I've done is just to demonstrate here the processes. I have one for update, which now the object has been updated, and then another one for exit, to exit out of the window that has there. Now what's going to happen here in a second is, in the background, the program is going through and it was making modifications to the base object. So if you were to come down here and look closely, you would see that the string was changed, the double was changed, and the integer was changed. What I have here, though, is I've created in the project, this is, remember, a sample project, I've created a sample object. These are XML representations of properties of the project, and these are properties of an object within the project. So I can now save this, and I'll just call this a sample for video. So I save that, and it'll get actually saved as a file, and the file is going to contain all the changes that I just made, and save successfully. So now if I exit the application, oops, if I exit, okay, it's taking a second. If I exit the application, Then if I restart the application, and it takes a second to start, because that does a little bit of validation. I would normally put up, that's why another reason why splash screen is good, because what it does do is it does validate the data. Now, if I bring this back over, it's got the default values in here. It didn't bring up the old one, but if I go open and I do a sample for video, now that is going to be the one that I've actually got here in the system. So it's going to open that file. And if I were to edit, I would get the new properties that I actually just entered previously. So I can exit that. So this is an example of how this works. What I'm going to go over in other videos is, because I'm going to keep these videos to about 10 to 15 minutes, is how did I do this? How does this actually work? Before I go into that, I'm going to give you a little bit of a teaser here, because startup form, if I look at the code behind startup form, I had that button that said open. Well, it actually, all it does is just take the project, run a method called open, and put the output to the text box, which is what you saw. And if I wanted to save, it just goes to the project and save. Well, how does this work? If I go to, and let's look a little bit at those, I have two pieces of this. I have the project, that is the actual global project class that represents everything that's in a project. And the project is whatever you're working on, whatever this application is designed to do. I've got some really, really extensive applications built on top of this with thousands of variables that all sit inside of a sample project. But really what it is it's hundreds and hundreds of different objects behind the scenes. So if I'm looking at the sample project, I've got the project has the ability to open itself, and it has the ability to serialize itself to XML and all the objects that it contains. So if I were to go up here right to the top and say, well, what does it contain? What it does is it contains, in this case, because it's an example, it contains a sample object, which I define right here, which is a sample object, which actually has three properties that you just saw, a string, a double, and an integer, just to demonstrate those three different types of things that you've got on there. And I have the ability to push and pull values to and from that sample object. It doesn't do anything else other than that. And it inherits from this thing that I call XML property object. XML property object is just all those base classes from a class that is, because sample object is a child of XML property object, that have the ability to take these values and convert them into XML and bring them back. Well, again, the point here is to not have to write a lot of code to do these things. So when I go to sample project, I have methods. The project itself, in this case, it has one sample object. It could have a dictionary of them. It could have many different types of objects. But it's very easy to tell it to create and open and save those. Now I'm going to go through a lot of these, but it has the ability to convert itself to XML and save itself to XML as a file. There's one other thing that I want to show you as part of this. Now, really, to create a project, to create an entire application that has these capabilities, all you have to do is go to my GitHub, pull down this project, and just start building on it, because I've documented and given examples of how to do everything. But before we go, we're going to actually go to the file that was being saved, and let's see, I can pull it here and documents, and I actually put it right here, and I can open this with Notepad, and you can see there's those values that I put in there, and it's just all saved as XML. So that's how that whole thing works. So there's some beauty and some elegance to this, and I use this all the time. If I have questions on this video, I will go through and give more details. One of the things to point out is that the GitHub is public. So it has its own public GitHub, and right here. So you can't see it. Let's make it so you can see this. There it is, my GitHub Eaglin WindowsAppBase, which is a very easy GitHub address. If I come down here, github.com, Eaglin WindowsAppBase, and it's public, so you can pull this. And I do keep this relatively up to date. I will also be showing, this is for a Windows app. There's another one called WebAppBase that, in the case of WebAppBase, instead of saving the object to a file, it saves the object to a database. It's a web application, so the forms are examples of web forms, and it does use web forms because web forms actually most closely approximates the same type of forms that you have in a Windows app and a web app. They look the same. So I do use that. Anyway, it's all right here, and it's there for use. I will soon go over how pieces of this work. So it should be some good coding, and if you want to use this, it's free for use. Thank you.